Thank you all so much for joining us. It is our annual policy panel today. Andy Johnson will not be joining us today, but we have Kerri and Steve here. And I'm just going to turn it over to you guys. If my favorite way to view panels is I'm going to turn off my video and everyone who's not presenting. And then if each one of you wants to hover over any square of anyone and click on the three dots in the upper right-hand corner, you can hit hide non-video participants. And then when I turn off the rest of the videos, you'll be able to see Kerri and Steve in gallery mode. So you'll be able to see them both, but nobody else. So that's my favorite way to view a screen during a panel, but feel free to do it however you want. And I'll let you both introduce yourselves and then just take it away. Thank you both for being here.
Yes, thank you, Heidi, and really appreciate being with you today, even though it's a sad day after the passing of Andy's father. But always have enjoyed interacting and talking with the folks up in Decorah and Winneshiek County. You're kind of a bright spot in the world of energy in the state of Iowa. And so it's always a treat for me to have a chance to visit with you. So while Andy was setting up today's discussion, he had written out about a page and a half of notes just for my presentation of things to cover. And he said, I have 15 minutes, but I think everything that he put down to cover would last at least an hour. So I have shortened it a bit, and I jotted down some notes that I'm going to go over because I want to give you a little bit. Well, I should introduce myself. I'm Steve Falk with the Environmental Law and Policy Center, and I'm based in Des Moines with Josh Mandelbaum. Our headquarters is in Chicago, and we have several Midwestern locations for EOPC. So I have been looking at the federal activity and things going on. Quite frankly, there's more opportunities now at the federal level with a new administration and Democrats in control of the House and the Senate. So it's a really exciting time for the everything energy related going on and things going on in Washington, D.C. So if you remember back just before Christmas last year, Congress passed a $900 billion COVID stimulus bill, and that was paired with a $1.4 trillion federal spending package. And in that federal piece were a variety of energy and climate related provisions that together made up some of the most significant actions on climate in years, at least from Congress. The bill included an extension of the federal solar investment tax credit for 2 years at the 26% level, instead of dropping down as it had been scheduled to drop down to 22% in 2021 and 10% in 2022. This means that solar projects in all market segments, that's residential, commercial, industrial, and utility scale, that begin construction in 2021 and 2022 will still be able to receive a tax credit of 26%. All markets will drop to a 22% tax credit in 2023, and the residential market will drop to zero, but the commercial and utility markets will sit at a permanent 10% tax credit beginning in 2024. The federal tax credits for wind were extended for 1 year, and offshore wind was made eligible for the first time with a window that will last until 2025. The stimulus also authorized $35 billion in funding over 5 years for programs at the Department of Energy that support renewables, carbon capture technologies, and energy efficiency. The bill authorized $1 billion for energy storage research and development, as another $2.3 billion for smart grid technology. Now this will allow for better integration of electric vehicles, renewable energy, and energy storage. Now more on this DOE allocation later, but the legislation also included a critical phase down of hydrofluorocarbons, HFCs, which are chemicals that are used in refrigerators and air conditioners that are hundreds of times more powerful than carbon dioxide in terms of their global warming impact. In 2016, an international agreement was reached in Kigali, Rwanda, targeted the global elimination of HFCs, but the US never passed the specifics of the agreement into law. The latest stimulus and the spending package effectively did just that. It's phasing out HFCs down in the years ahead. Now, this is a major win for climate proponents that say Kigali Agreement has the potential to eliminate a 0.5 degrees Celsius of warming. But the most impactful in near-term provisions of the spending bill, and especially given the current economic crisis we're in, and now with the polar vortex, it relates to Weatherization Assistance Program, the WAP. 1/4 of all US households and 2/3 of low-income households have a high energy burden, meaning that 6% of their income goes to utilities bills. The WAP started during the energy crisis in the 1970s. Congress allocated $1.7 billion and reauthorized the program to 2024, and also made it much more flexible. It redesigned the program to allow renewable energy to qualify, potentially opening up access to solar panels for low-income communities. And a series of administrative changes also should make it more accessible to more people. This will create new jobs, which will reach many more households. It's a low-income assistance program, a health program, and a jobs program that also happens to be an energy efficiency program. For energy storage, it will reduce the costs of short-term and long-term seasonal energy transportation storage technologies with a $1.08 billion investment over 5 years. So that is what was contained, some of the highlights contained in the bill that passed last year in Congress, but we do have more opportunities in Congress. And so we're going to be looking at several of the agriculture-related energy programs, such as REAP. The REAP program will, we're looking at really injecting, kind of doubling the spending in this program, as well as making it more efficient. So stay tuned for some things that will be going on in Congress yet for energy efficiency and renewable energy in agriculture. So what are the opportunities for energy districts? Well, remember earlier when I said DOE is getting $35 billion over 5 years? Inside the DOE, there is the EERE. This is the Office of Energy Efficiency and Renewable Energy. Developed by the Business Operations and Strategics Program Area, EERE has 13 initiatives and projects, and we see an opportunity to add energy districts as a new initiative. A couple of years ago, EOPC convened a meeting of energy districts from Iowa and included other groups that may be interested in becoming an energy district from Wisconsin, Illinois, and Michigan. The group in Michigan that attended this meeting is from Traverse City, and Andy and I are reaching out to them to gauge their interest in joining with us to go make a pitch directly to DOE. The thought is that since the new Secretary of the Department of Energy is a former governor of Michigan, Jennifer Granholm, she may be interested in helping a community in her home state. So this is going to be a long shot, but with creativity and innovation back in DC, I think it's worth a shot. So stay tuned on this piece. We're going to be making this presentation to the Traverse City group. And from there, we're going to develop a strategy and how we're going to start reaching out to the Department of Energy. We are also looking for opportunities in Congress for the energy district model. And this is something that it could be in the farm bill, it could be another energy bill for DOE. So depending on what happens with our attempt to get in the EERE program as an initiative, we also will be making runs in Congress to expand the, at least start a pilot program for energy districts. So we might be reaching out for you to engage our congressional partners in this, Congress and the US Senate. And we would also be engaging the congressionals from Wisconsin, Illinois, and Michigan. So with that, I think I'll just stop right here, Heidi. And if anybody has any questions, or we could have a discussion about other thoughts that you may have for opportunities in DC.
So if people have questions, you can feel free to unmute yourself or go ahead and type it in the chat, and I can make sure I can read it out.
Which item do you think will have the most opportunity, Steve?
Well, given, we really, the key to the strategy with DOE is to get Traverse City engaged. And they currently have a group that is organized, and they do a lot in the community. They're a nonprofit. They do a lot in their community with food assistance and housing. But we were trying to, see if they could make room for energy. We think it would be a nice fit with this existing organization. So that's what we're going to try to get them on board, because they're going to be key to get inside of DOE. Having that Michigan connection, we hope to get some attention. And if, like I say, that's a long shot. If that doesn't come about, well, then we're going to, engage a congressional strategy. We think there's a much better, we have been talking about energy districts to our congressional folks. We started doing that a year ago. Whenever I had a meeting with any of the staff from the committees from our congressional partners, energy districts were on the list. So we're doing some education with the congressional members on energy districts. I remember coming up to Winneshiek County when you had Congresswoman Finkenauer in, and all the energy districts that were represented spoke to her about energy districts. That's the kind of engagement I think makes sense to do with Congresswoman Hinson, and then include Miller Meeks if she continues to be the member in Congress. Well,
a quiet group today.
Yeah. Well, you're probably more interested in what's going on at the state level.
Well, I'm interested in the role for agriculture.
Yes, we see a lot of climate policy and carbon credits, farming carbon. In agriculture, there's just going to be a big opportunity. Former Governor Vilsack, I was on the governor's policy staff when he was the governor. And I remember when he would leave for a few days rest, or he and Kristen would take a weekend off, and he would always come back to the office with yellow pads, legal pads full of notes and new ideas and things he wanted to, get into. So, I know that he is just really engaged with, having another chance at the Secretary of USDA. And he is going to be, his staff is really going to be, having to work hard to keep up with him. He's got a lot of things on his agenda that relate to climate and energy. So we do see some opportunities at USDA, as well as, we're talking about with DOE.
I'll be curious to see what it'll look like if they're looking at potentially paying farmers to sequester carbon in the soil, and just how that would all work.
Yeah, there is a lot of kind of third-party groups out there. They're already signing farmers up to sequester carbon. But that is, the complexities of testing for how much carbon is actually sequestered. I see the role at the federal government is really being the, laying out the framework. There's got to be strict verification protocols, certification protocols, and, just to test for carbon in soil. Different soil types store different amounts of carbon. Well, Iowa has over 450 different soil types.
Yeah.
And so the science has to be right, to know and to verify just how much carbon. So we have a farm down in southern Fayette County, and I was looking at the soil map on one of our 80 acres, and there were 6 different soil types. And, soil types follow the contour of the land, not necessarily one corner is this soil type and another corner is this. It was kind of, squiggly lines all over that 80 acres of different soil types. So knowing, how to test for that carbon to verify what is actually being sequestered. So I see the role of the federal government as being that, laying out the framework, the regulatory framework, but so all of the groups that pop up to be aggregators where farmers can sign up, with different aggregators for carbon credits. And really what's going to make that carbon credit valuable is if there's a cap. If there's no cap, it's in the neighborhood, carbon credits are on the market for, $20 to $25 a ton. But if you had a cap, that would increase. And so there should be a cap on carbon from our point of view. But yeah, it's going to be the complexities of the carbon credits is going to be really interesting to see how it unfolds. Let me ask the energy districts that are represented either from around Eastern Iowa or from Winneshiek County, have you had a chance to engage Congresswoman Hinson yet?
In Howard County, I haven't. I don't know if Amy has reached out to her yet. So no, as far as I know.
Well, I do have some contacts for her office there at the state level. I think her main office is in Cedar Rapids, and then a couple of names in DC. But getting on her radar screen, and I like how it was with Congresswoman Finkenauer, where you had a luncheon like this, and you invited her to that. It'd be nice to get more than 15 minutes with her. But if she could stay for like an hour to kind of really hear about how the energy district model works, I think that would be valuable.
Sounds like a good idea. Would you want to send that contact information out to the districts?
I'll get it to Heidi, and then
okay.
She disperse it from there.
Sounds good. Thank you. All right, should we move into state policy?
I can do that. I had to move to the floor of my hallway because my internet connection was getting a little wonky. So I had to get the cord plugged in here so I don't lose you all. Kerri Johannsen, I'm the Energy Program Director with the Iowa Environmental Council. My maiden name is Kerri Boschka. I'm from Protivin. So I spent a lot of time in Decorah and Winneshiek County, but of course went to rival Crestwood High School. So we won't get into that too much. We won't talk wrestling or anything like that. So just wanted to give you a little overview of current happenings at the State House and talk a little bit as well about some regulatory issues that are likely of interest to you. I know that your staff and your team there keeps you really well updated on a lot of happenings, but in case you have any more in-depth questions, happy to answer those as well. So we're kind of right in the middle of an acceleratingly hectic part of the legislative session. The first funnel where bills have to be out of a committee on either the Senate or the House side is approaching on March 5th. And as that happens, of course, you know, we start to see more subcommittee meetings happening, et cetera. And so it starts to become clear which bills are moving fast and where we're running into problems. A bill I'm sure many of you have been aware of and watching is House File 221. And that is the bill that would pay down the waiting list and really extend and expand the solar investment tax credit in Iowa. So as many of you probably know, there has been a growing waiting list for the credit, which is currently capped at $5 million and tied to the federal investment tax credit. So Steve mentioned earlier the federal extension. Our Iowa credit was actually tied to the 2016 extension of the credit. So even though the federal credit was extended, the state credit does not extend because it is tied to a different year. So regardless of what happens, if we don't decouple from the federal credit, we still need to make sure it's tied to the new extension. However, the bill that is currently moving and is passed through a subcommittee would take the cap from the current $5 million per year up to $10 million per year. It would completely decouple from the federal credit so that it would just be a 15% tax credit. And it would also have $7 million extra this year to pay down the waiting list so that we're not trying to play catch up year after year. We start with more of at least closer to a clean slate on the waiting list, which is now a couple of years long to get the credit. So we're feeling pretty positive about the prospects for the bill in the House. The next step there is for it to go through the full Ways and Means Committee. We hope to see that happen soon. And there's I mentioned the funnels earlier. Ways and Means bills aren't subject to the funnel, and so they don't have the same kind of pressing deadline, unfortunately. But it is important to get it moving early so that it becomes part of the overall budgeting process for both for this year and for the years ahead as the legislature is doing their larger budgeting work. So that is one that, of course, we have been reaching out to folks to advocate on and have been following closely. A few other bills that I wanted to bring to your attention. I know some of you have probably heard about the Vegetation Management Bill. That one is, let's see, Senate Study Bill 1088 and House File 460. The House bill is already on the floor, but the Senate bill is still in subcommittee, and Senator Klimisch is on that subcommittee. I know that he expressed some concerns about this bill. It really broadens the ability of utilities to have kind of carte blanche to do the kind of vegetation management that they think is appropriate without any repercussions if they do something that they shouldn't. So it's very broad, permissive language that we have concerns about encroaching on the ability of, cities who might have urban forestry plans or rural landowners that value old growth trees to really do anything about where the utilities are cutting and what they're doing. And so Steve's been working on this bill, and Cody with the Center for Rural Affairs has also been offering some ways to change the bill to put some more accountability in there for the utilities and make sure that we are having a good balance between the reliability of the distribution grid and valuable vegetation. And then another bill that we are watching really closely is House Study Bill 166 and Senate Study Bill 1126 is the companion. And that bill would preempt the ability of cities and counties to do any kind of regulation over natural gas or propane hookups. This bill is a response to activities in some coastal states like California, where local elected officials have made the decision that new construction should be all electric. As part of climate plans, as part of reducing costs for new homeowners. And of course, this is something that fossil fuel companies did not like to see happening. It's not something that's being proposed in Iowa in any way. But this is designed to supposedly get out in front of that. We think, first of all, it's an issue of local control. If a city decides that electric is the best way to grow or some other kind of alternative fuel is preferable for the people in their community, we think they should have the ability to make that decision. It's not really a decision of the state government to tell them that they can't make that. We also know that there are health benefits and cost benefits to all electric. And we know in the state that in many parts of the state, there is not access to natural gas. And so people are on propane, they're subject to wild price swings at times. Right now, we're under an emergency for almost all fuels you can think of course, with the cold and what's happening all around the country. But we certainly don't think that we should pass a law locking local governments into using natural gas and propane for the foreseeable future. So we do have concerns about this bill, and we are working to try to at least narrow it to make it less harmful to the ability of local governments to determine the energy future of their communities. Those are the main bills that we're tracking. The other item I had on my agenda list was to talk about the new solar tariffs, the net metering tariffs that policies that the Utilities Board recently approved. But I'm going to take a pause here and see if folks have legislative related questions before I move on to the tariffs, since we're kind of jumping to a totally different realm.
Do you think this, the gas and propane one is pretty likely to pass? It just sounds like you said you're just trying to hope to limit some aspects of it. Do you think it's like going to go through? What's your view on that?
I do. I think that, similar bills have been proposed in 11 other states. There's obviously a coordinated campaign going on among the gas industry. If you look at the registrations among lobbyists and who's working on this, I mean, it's an overwhelming effort by the utilities and the propane industry, the Association of Business and Industry, the home builders, to kind of stick together on this and try to get it through against the League of Cities, the Association of Counties, and the Association of Municipal Utilities is neutral on the bill. And other than that, it's, the Enviros. So, just kind of doing the little power analysis there, I would say that trying to narrow it, yes, is really our best hope at this point. But I think I mean, I think continued contact and agitation and pointing out the ridiculous outcomes of a bill like this continues to be really important. So, you know, even though I think that this is headed towards passage, I don't think we should give up until, you know, it's all done, because there have been enough questions and doubts raised about this, even by the utilities that brought the bill to begin with, that I think it's important to keep pointing out, you know, where this doesn't make any sense for cities and counties.
Great, thanks.
Yep. Any other legislative related questions? Otherwise, I'll talk about net metering. Okay. All right. So this is, you know, something of a holdover from the efforts over the two previous sessions to first stop the bad sunshine tax bill in 2019, and then in early 2020, right before the pandemic started, to get the new net metering bill passed and signed after a lengthy negotiation with Mid-American. And so the utilities filed their new tariffs, which are, you know, it lays out, it's a regulatory document they file at the utilities board that lays out in detail how they're going to implement the law. It's the rules they have to follow when they do this. And so we had challenged initially some elements of Alliance tariff because we thought had a lot of unintended consequences. I think we got to a much better place with them. At the end of the day, we didn't get everything we wanted, but we are excited about the opportunity. We think this affords people in Alliance service territory that they didn't have before. So the way that the new net metering works is that if you install a new solar system, or if you are a current solar customer, you can also opt into the tariff. You don't have to stick with your old version if you don't want to, and you can net meter up to an amount that is projected to cover your entire yearly usage. So Alliant had these artificial demand restraints on it before, so that you could only net meter up to 65 or 70% of your usage previously. Now you explicitly have to be allowed to net meter up to 100% of your annual usage. You will, instead of receiving credits on your bill that then you use against future bills, you receive credits, but it's in the form of, it's translated into a dollar amount. So you're compensated at the retail rate for the energy that you send to the grid, and you pay the retail rate for the energy that you use from the grid. And that credit that you get then can be used to offset your energy bills for up to a year, with cash outs in December and April, similar to how it was done previously. So it shouldn't, from a customer standpoint, it shouldn't have a lot of, the payback should be similar, except, as I said, you know, in Alliance service territory, we should see larger systems being able to be built. I'm sorry, and I misstated that. So it's not 100%, it's 110% is how you can initially size your system up to 110% of your projected or historical usage. And that allows for both load growth. If you for example, add an electric car, it also allows for some decay of the system over time. As we know, panels don't perform as well year after year. So that new tariff is available from Alliant. I don't know if we have anybody who has used it yet. I'm excited to see folks' experience with it. It's pretty straightforward. I think one of the items that we didn't do as well on as we were hoping is has to do with distribution of the renewable energy credits. So Alliant and Mid-American both had proposed that they would keep the renewable energy credits for any power that they were compensating customers for. So anything that a system generates in excess of what's needed at the moment, any outflow, those renewable energy credits are kept by the utility. You can negotiate with the utility for purchase of those RECs if you are aiming to say you're 100% renewable. We expect that maybe larger businesses might do that if they have those kinds of goals. It might be harder for individuals. We fought on that. The Office of Consumer Advocate was on the other side of it. We just couldn't get all the way there. So unfortunately, that's one downside. But we still think that overall, this is a big improvement for Alliant customers.
I'm just curious if any like time of day rates apply in this system. So are they credited at the retail value for like when they give the power, and then do they pay back at a different rate, or is it just a standard rate all the way across? Did that question make sense there? Yeah.
It does, because actually we have a solar system and we're on a time of day rate right now. And it has been restricted to, you can only use peak credits against peak hours, etc. And I don't know, the tariff doesn't specifically address how that will be done. And so that is a question that I actually need to reach out to Mid-American to find out. I don't know if others have found out how Alliant is handling that, because I don't know. I thought maybe Joel had the answer, but maybe not.
You know, that is my understanding of the credit, that you could be able to use those offset credits from your peak hours to offset your lower cost. I haven't ran into many customers who have done that yet, because most times people are just sizing to meet 100% of their needs, and it's easier and simpler for them to stay on a non-time of day rate, which for Alliant customers is optional. But I do think that this tariff should allow that even easier than the old net metering one did. So, you know, and I'll just add too, I mean, just in addition to the credits being passed, the net metering piece was a long battle that was fought over several years. And so just want to thank you guys, and just give you the recognition for the work that you did on first stopping that bad sunshine tax law 2 years ago, and then getting the net metering bill passed just in time last year before the legislature shut down in the spring. So we're now finally seeing that policy come into place. And the great thing about it, just for everybody who is on the call, is that it's going to be in place for 7 or so years. And any of those new customers that are signing up under the rate at that time will be grandfathered into that rate for the life of their system. So it really does add a lot of certainty to solar customers to know that they're going to get a net metering or a close to net metering benefit, so that they can expect some really good payback times on their solar investments.
Yeah, thanks, Joel. That's a great point. And even after the 7-year deadline, what we're going to roll into is a value of solar, which, you know, I assume we have a lot of energy nerds on the call. There was a great study out of Michigan just a few days ago that showed that really the value of solar customers are pretty heavily subsidizing non-solar customers. And so 7 years from now, who knows what those calculations will show. But we're very optimistic about that. And just want to also say that, you know, I don't think we could have gotten where we did with defeating the solar bill and getting this done without the energy districts and the connections that you all have grown up in your areas of the state. So bravo to you know, the partnership that we have in helping this happen.
Yeah, I would just want to echo that. Energy districts have become really important advocates. And I know that that's part of your mission, is to become energy advocates. And that is really very helpful. So we appreciate that, the work that you are doing.
Yeah, for sure. Are there any other?
Thank you both. This is Joel again. I've got one more question that I almost asked at the end of the legislative piece, but now it's sort of in between. And this is, you guys are focused a lot on some of the things that you mentioned and the solar tax credit extension, especially of getting that sorted out so that we're not having this huge waiting cap. But I've been talking with a lot of installers lately, and there just seems like Alliant is doing whatever they can. And maybe Mid-Am is as well, but the contractors up here are dealing with Alliant more than anything else, of just kind of slowing down the application process. And I wonder if there's any pressure that we can apply, either working with you to get the legislators or to get the utilities board to sort of make sure that those processes remain streamlined and that customers aren't waiting the absolute longest they possibly can for each time to interconnect their system.
I think it would be really good for us to have a longer discussion about that. I'd like to hear kind of what's going on and how widespread it is. There are, interconnection rules in place through the Iowa Utilities Board. I cannot recall off the top of my head what, if anything, they include for timelines. So I would have to look at that, but I think that, there was just a pretty big case in Minnesota that you probably heard about, where Xcel Energy was penalized for slow walking interconnections. And so I don't know what we have in place in Iowa and whether we have anything parallel to that, but that is certainly another way to stop people, right? To make it really unpleasant to interconnect, and then to, you tell your neighbors about what a pain it was, and then, people are less likely to make investments. So we certainly don't want to be seeing that happening either. So Joel, maybe we should just have a reach out and let's maybe have a more in-depth conversation about that particular topic. So I have to dig into it a little bit more.
Joel, in the meantime, if you could document, before we can take a complaint anywhere, they're going to want to know some of the specifics. And so, any type of documentation, time waiting, number of phone calls, because if you start to collect that over time, you can start to see patterns. And, I don't know how we can get a baseline from, 2 years ago, but we need to start documenting now before anybody would even think about doing anything.
Yeah, that's good. That's good. I'll have the contractors do that and make sure that they're taking notes, which I know they are. And just for other folks on the call too, I'll say this is that, the real pain is for the contractors. That I think up here at least, they are taking care of that process for you, and so that you don't have to think about being scared off of putting up solar, of dealing with the utility. The contractor is usually fighting with you on your behalf. But it takes a lot of time, and they kind of hit them with extra fees, and that ultimately gets baked into the price of what they're able to offer solar. And so if we can keep those soft costs down, that'll be better. And no one will have to pull their hair out with sitting on the other end of customer service phone line.
Joel, and another question I'd like to ask you. Go ahead, Kerri, if you had something on this. Ask you, the newest member of the Utilities Board is from Osage, Josh Burns. And I know that there was a community solar project in Osage, but what I'd be interested to know is, has Osage, have they put any of the contractors done any work inside the city of Osage to know kind of how he was handling residential or commercial hookups?
That's a good question. I don't know the answer to it. I know that they weren't super excited about solar in terms of how their rate structure was set up with their utility, but they were certainly realizing that they should be looking at how to compensate those users for the power that they create, and how to better write their contracts in the future from their suppliers that would allow them to do that.
Well, we're trying to gauge how he might, his attitude toward DG Solar, and that would be helpful to kind of get some insight.
Yeah, we had him, Josh Burns came to talk to us when Decorah was contemplating a municipal electric utility, as well as a gentleman from New Hampton. And I do remember that Josh was far more positive towards solar, but that was, I think, in large part because New Hampton actually has experienced a loss of customer base in some industrial customers. And so they were actually on the hook for buying a pretty large amount of power that was over their actual usage. And so they weren't getting any benefit from customer owned solar within their district in New Hampton. So anyways, it was interesting to compare those two things.
Yeah, we know the New Hampton director. I'm missing his name right now. He was a former legislator.
Starts with a Q, right? Quirk, Brian Quirk.
Brian Quirk. And what's interesting is Quirk Electric, or his dad's electric, he's an electric contractor. They used to install solar panels for businesses and residential. So it's curious now that Brian is at the Muni, he's not so keen on the technology.
Well, until they can get out of that contract, it makes it tough. You know, I mean, just as far as being able to you know, they pre-purchased their energy, so to speak.
Yeah, well, that's true.
That's crazy. They can't. I mean, it just points to the unfairness of these super lengthy contracts. And that's, you know, a problem for both munis and RECs that signed on thinking they were getting a good deal on a 50-year contract. And now we're in a time of complete disruption of technology. It just seems like there should be a way to point to that as a reason to rethink these contracts, but that's tough.
And we have to remember that munis are allowed by law to discriminate against PV solar.
Right.
Back 2311 is still haunting.
Yeah, it's kind of an interesting time to be having this discussion generally, as you know, a lot of the nation is facing what, you know, I've seen people today calling a black swan energy event. And I know that's, you know, top of my mind today. I don't know if other folks are thinking about that as well. I know we've even had some, you know, really a lot of the issues are happening down south in terms of constraints on the energy supply, but they are having ripple effects all the way up into northern and western Iowa with some rolling blackouts in REC service territory over there. Just wanted to note that, you know, seeing initial media coverage, there have been some, you know, just first off the cuff sort of, oh, it's freezing wind turbines. And I just wanted to make sure that if you're hearing that, it's not accurate. There has been some drop off in wind production in the south because of these fronts, but it's actually overperforming what's expected for this kind of a weather pattern. And it's really natural gas, freezing of natural gas wellheads, freezing of natural gas units, natural gas units being offline unexpectedly that has caused this issue. So I just wanted to note that because I think it's going to be necessary to push back on some of the narrative around what has caused this. And also just to note that as we're facing climate change, you know, who would have thought that, you know, back when we were calling it global warming, that this sort of gigantic winter peak would have been an outcome of these changing weather patterns, and that something like a big winter heating peak is something that, you know, we need to plan for. And there are ways to do that have a lot to do with infrastructure and resiliency, and microgrids and, you know, being really interconnected and smart. But it can be done with renewables, and actually renewables are performing very well at a time that fossil fuels are kind of failing us. And so I don't know, it's just, kind of been obsessing about it the last couple of days as we've, tried to turn down our gas and be part of the solution in these crazy few days. But just wanted to mention that.
Well, and as long as Kerri brought up grid resiliency, I see where Alliant is putting in a 2.5 megawatt battery in Decorah. And the article I was reading said that this project will connect to customer solar-owned projects. How are they planning to do that? Isn't it just going to be connected to the grid?
Yeah, Steve, I'm unclear on the details, but they are putting it on a circuit at least that has a lot of solar, which includes Luther College, both the wind turbine and their solar. And there's a pretty large solar installation very close to those batteries. So, just laws of physics being what they are, when those solar panels at Venium are producing extra power, they probably will go to the battery, even though they are connecting through the grid, not directly connected to the battery from the solar.
Well, I really like the idea of pairing storage to a renewable source and not just having it happenstance on the grid where you could be storing coal generated energy. So that I appreciate that feedback, because I think that's going to be interesting to see, and I hope they are going to be kind of forthcoming with the data that they're seeing with the storage and are transparent with it. And how are they using it would be another, to know how they're planning to use that storage. So, but I think it's a very innovative project, and I just was curious as to kind of the local feedback.
We might not have enough time in the rest of the call, Steve, for all the feedback I had.
I recognize it's Alliant, but DOE gave a lot of money, as well as the Iowa Energy Office. So, the taxpayers have a stake in that. Yeah,
no, I do hope that they share information from that on how it's working for them. And I do hope that they'll be able to ease up on some of the trouble we've been having too, as far as getting, as I mentioned earlier, contractors having kind of to run around with the application process for that neighborhood.
Yeah.
Anyone have any last questions? Got 3 minutes left. If not, I will just jump in here with a plug for Clayton County Energy District. They are having a lunch and learn tomorrow with Iowa Business for Clean Energy. Let me share my screen quick so you can see the details of that. So similar time frame tomorrow at noon. You can go to their website to sign up. It should be a good conversation. And then also the Winneshiek Energy District is having a book club, and our first meeting is today. So if you haven't read the book yet, you can join us and just listen in. Otherwise, we're having a discussion about the second half of the book on March 2nd. So if you're interested in signing up for either of those things, you can feel free to give me an email or a shout out in the chat, and we'll get you the links for those things. But other than that, if there's no other questions, thank you so much, Kerri and Steve. It was great to have you both. This is one of our most popular lunches of the year, and it's fun to have you guys be our voices of policy.
Well, I'm looking forward to actually coming up to Decorah sometime.
Yes.
Looking forward to future meetings. So thanks for the invitation.
Sure. Thanks a lot.
Thank you.
Thank you, everybody.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Put another log on the fire.